guys, I wanted to do a quick tutorial on your looking at moving into that finished introduction and the final or the first paragraph. So I'm going to share with you a conference paper on which is a literary expression paper and a literary analysis paper from, let's see here. Okay, so looking at this idea here, the very beginning, America has a long-standing tradition of fighting for its independence, and there's also some edits here, especially from the British and casting off the chains of tyranny. As the country grew, so did the desire for national identity, one that was distinctly unique from others, and especially Britain. However, it could not just be any delineation of text, but rather an amalgamation of bravery, heroic deeds, and a sense of justice. End quote. As the country grew and its voice became bolder, academics sought to establish its own voice. And so we keep moving into the basic background ideas of what we're talking about here. However, American writers sought their independence from the formalized writing of the English aristocracy, a problem that Walt Whitman coined as the tremendous and fearful subject. And during this time period, we're talking about the people coming to this country and then also moving all the way through national identity, even up to the 1800s. And Shakespeare is kind of an interesting figure because lots of people claim them as his own, and William Shakespeare was part of the group that came over on the Mayflower. He met with them and before he died, and was actually going to move to America, which is part of the reason why Americans claimed him for their own. They needed a hero and an established voice to champion their cause, and they also needed to separate themselves intellectually from others. And then there's another quote there. However, surpassing the status quo was not enough. They needed to claim a piece of the crown and reappropriate it as their own. And thanks to chauvinistic and inaccurate historical genealogies chronicled by Richard Slatkin, Americans had a new hero that he identified as the champion of Anglo-Saxon racial superiority, William Shakespeare. So, and then that's the background. So we move on further, and we're talking about several other examples. And if you notice, mine is pretty long here, and I should have started a new paragraph about halfway through down. So you can see I did some edits on here for you to try to give you an idea. But my thesis here, albeit ironically and notably English, Shakespeare fulfilled a void in the gap of American canon and provided a means for American scholars to join the conversation. For Shakespeare became the author in which to compel all others, especially American authors, to new material. So there's my thesis there. Okay, and then the next paragraph starts and gives the background information. As the drive to fuel academia increased, so did the availability of public education in New England. Shakespeare became a central figure in that education, appearing on the shelves of modern classrooms and in the homes of pioneers. And I have a quote there by Sturgis. There is certainly no land on the whole earth which Shakespeare and the Bible are held in such high esteem, and is in America. So much criticized for love and money. Should one enter a blockhouse situated far west, the Bible in most cases, a cheap edition of poet Shakespeare, are nearly always found. So this is giving a background of why Shakespeare was somebody that was identified not only with British culture, but also with American culture, because it was something, if you were educated and well-read, then you needed to know Shakespeare. So then it's just a very small blurb that I'm giving as background of why Shakespeare would have been included in the American text. I go on to talk about this idea. At this time, it is important to recognize that middle-class women had access to public education. So we're talking about the early 1800s, and became some of the greatest advocates of Shakespeare and his words, especially the class of women writers and abolitionists that arose in the early 1800s. So within Shakespeare, we find lots of different ideas, which is why Shakespeare transcends time. Because he talks about representing characters that are the underdogs, especially like with Othello, with things like the Merchant of Venice, where he's representing the Jewish merchant who gets kind of the best of everybody. prominent female roles in all of his plays. So this would be something that they would identify with and use to help drive their point to go against things that were wrong in the world, especially the abolition of slavery, which became very prominent in the 1800s. Women writers provided a means to voice the concerns of those who ran the inner sphere, which means the home, and Shakespeare's bold and universal themes resonated with the deep sense of obligation most women writers felt in establishing their stories in a genre known as sentimentalism, as romantic sentimentalism. Now, again, this is a beginning draft, and so I have edited it, but it needs to go back and we need to edit more. So don't shy away from, looking through this. And I even here have a footnote back up at the top when we're talking about Anglo-American identity, which reshaped to form the American hero, provide daily wisdom and guidance. And then here is from McGuffey Readers had concept little blurbs of Shakespeare, and that's what that reference is. And then again, I don't forget that even in my footnote, I have my parenthetical citation, right? And in this particular case, this piece is talking about Catherine Maria Sedgwick, a book that she wrote that involves a Shakespeare play as the characters reenact the Shakespeare play, but the book itself actually models itself after The Tempest and Much Ado About Nothing. So, and uses direct references to certain scenes in there. So we're talking about Catherine Maria Sedgwick, who's one of the most prominent American women writers in the turn of the 1800s, the turn of the 19th century. She becomes a central voice for abolition and for women's rights. And then we also see her appreciation of Shakespeare. And so Shakespeare kind of becomes this unsung hero of early feminism and of 19th century change. So we look at that. These in-depth experiences and emotional novels centered on fiction that established a link between American romantic myth and Shakespeare, where writers included much of his quotation within their own writing to establish a difference towards the status quo and to add authority to their writing. Women in the 19th century were committed to creating a new woman, one who was educated and found a cause worthy of her affections outside of her sphere, while simultaneously maintaining her domestic domain. Consequently, Shakespeare's brash and vital characters provide a template for a new voice in the literature of the 19th century, one in which America could sink its teeth into and devour, and one that resounded in self-actualization of female reverence, a voice that resonated with women but also with the political environment of the day. One such writer who championed this idea of individuality and challenge was Catherine Maria Sedgwick, who challenged not only the American public, but also reading public with her overt use of Shakespeare costuming to achieve her feminist agenda. Her intent through character was to show a woman's ability to break through the domestic fear and societal norms, to challenge racist and patriarchal authority. So then we go on and we talk about that. So I have the background of Maria Sedgwick, Catherine Maria Sedgwick, and then by the end we get to Sedgwick's creations of self-reliant and actualizing women characters in Hope Leslie. Hope Leslie is clearly characterized by a reverence of self. We go into the actual Midsummer Night's Dream and Pyramus and Thisbe, Romeo and Juliet, Othello, Tristan and Isolde. The ideas that she pulls from, and then I move again to the actual piece of literature. So this is a really good example of showing you, okay, I have even Wollstonecraft pulled in there, and we're doing the background. So we're establishing why Shakespeare appears in American literature. He becomes a champion of American literature. And then we move down, giving the background of where he would have appeared in American society and literature, why, and then we talk about the literature itself all the way down here in Hope Leslie, which is a really good book too if you ever want to read something fun. It's all about the American frontier and Indians capturing people and hiding costumes and all kinds. And there's a lot of cross-dressing in it, which is also a Shakespeare concept. So, but I don't get into the Hope Leslie aspect until about the third or fourth paragraph. Okay, so this gives you a kind of an idea, an example of how you would put that background together with the introduction. and the thesis. Okay? Please let me know if you have any questions. I will post this video on both formats. And then if you have any other questions or you'd like to see this, I can also share this with you. Have a great day.